It was harvesting season when the combine jammed. The machine had cut through thousands of stalks already, chewing the cornfield down in perfect golden rows. But in row 17, just past the rusted fence line, the blades hit something that wasn't soil, stalk, or stone. The engine choked. The operator killed the power. And for a few seconds, there was nothing but wind and the dry whisper of corn leaves. When he climbed down to clear the blockage, he saw it. Not all at once, just pieces. A scrap of denim, the curve of a shoe, a pale shape in the dirt that should have been bone white but wasn't, because the earth had stained it the color of old tea. He stumbled back and called 911 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. By sundown, the cornfield was lit with red and blue. Deputies walked the rows with gloves and evidence bags. The sheriff ordered the press kept as far back as possible. Someone asked, "Who is it?" The sheriff looked toward the cluster of houses on the horizon, where curtains were already closing. "We'll find out," he said. "But whatever we find, it stays in this town. In a county where everybody knew everybody, this discovery should have shaken the town into confession. Instead, it was the start of a 30-year silence. This is the story of the cold case in the cornfield that the town refuses to talk about. You're listening to Enter the Crime. If you drive north out of Miller's Crossing, Iowa, you hit the cornfields in about 3 minutes. The town itself is small. A gas station, a diner, a hardware store, a church that doubles as a community hall. Main Street is 3 blocks long and ends at the grain elevator, a concrete tower every kid in town uses as a landmark. The field where the body was found sits just beyond the city limit sign. It belongs to the Harper family, who have been farming that land since before the highway was paved. On October 3rd, 1994, at 4:17 p.m., Farmer Earl Harper radioed his wife from the combine. "Call the sheriff," he said. "There's something in the field." Sheriff Tom Delaney was there in 15 minutes. He'd grown up in Miller's Crossing, played Little League on the same dusty diamonds as half the men now standing behind the police tape. He recognized Earl's shaking hands, knew Earl wasn't the kind of man to spook easily. The body was partially buried, lying between the rows, face down. The soil around it had compacted, as if something heavy had pressed down from above for a long time. The corn over that section was thinner than the rest, stalks shorter, leaves yellowing. Time had washed away the worst of the horror, but not enough. It was obvious even to the untrained eye. The victim had been young. The clothes, jeans, a faded sweatshirt, looked like something you'd see on any teenager in town. The shoes were cheap sneakers from the discount store off the interstate. There was no ID, no wallet, no purse. But there was one thing Earl noticed before the deputies gently rolled the body for the coroner. A friendship bracelet, frayed and faded, still clinging to the wrist. Earl had seen one just like it earlier that summer, on the arm of his niece. 3 months before the body was found, on June 18, 1994, Miller's Crossing had already lost someone. Her name was Katie Miller, 16 years old, an honor roll student, part-time cashier at the grocery store, and the kind of kid teachers used as an example when they said, "If Katie can juggle school and work, so can you." She vanished on a Saturday night. Katie told her parents she was going to a bonfire out by the river. A typical small-town summer thing. A dozen kids, some cheap beer, a cassette player, and the kind of harmless gossip adults pretended not to know about. She never came home. Her car was found the next morning at the dead-end turnaround near the water. Doors locked, keys in the ignition. No sign of a struggle. No footprints that couldn't be explained by the crowd that had been there hours earlier. The sheriff's office launched a search. Volunteers walked fields and ditches. Boats scanned the river. Flyers went up on telephone poles and in the grocery store window. The working theory was simple. Katie went down to the water, slipped, hit her head, and was carried away. The problem was the river that summer was low and slow. Divers found nothing. Dogs caught no clear scent trails. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some said she'd run away with a boyfriend no one knew about. Others whispered she'd gotten pregnant and left town in shame. A few said they'd seen a strange car cruising slowly down Main Street that night, out-of-state plates glinting in the glow of the traffic light. By August, the search had quieted. School started without her. Her locker stayed empty, a faded flyer taped to the door. Her parents clung to the idea that she might still come home. When the body turned up in Harper's cornfield in October, everyone knew what it meant before the coroner said a word. They just didn't know why her body had ended up there, buried in the very field that fed half the town. Sheriff Delaney treated the cornfield as a full crime scene. He called in the state crime lab from Des Moines, a move some locals grumbled about. In small towns, outside help feels like an accusation. The lab techs photographed every angle, flagged disturbed soil, measured the distance from the body to the property lines, to the road, and to the nearest farmhouse. The coroner's report would later say, approximate age mid-teens, sex female, cause of death, blunt force trauma to the back of the skull, time in ground 3 to 4 months. DNA testing was primitive by today's standards, but dental records and a distinctive fracture in the left wrist, an old softball injury, confirmed what everyone feared. The girl in the cornfield was Katie Miller. Sheriff Delaney called Katie's parents in person. Her mother collapsed in the doorway. Her father stared at Delaney for a long time and finally said, "Where'd you find her?" Delaney hesitated. Row 17, Harper's Field. Her father's jaw tightened. The Millers and Harpers had farmed neighboring land for generations. Church picnics, shared harvest equipment, kids who grew up together. "You telling me my girl's been lying there while we drove past that field every day?" he asked, voice cracking. Delaney had no answer. He ordered interviews with everyone at the bonfire that night, the Harper family, workers at the gas station and diner, anyone who'd driven that road regularly in June. Kids told versions of the same story. Katie was there. She laughed. She drank a little. Around midnight, she said she needed to leave for early shift at the store. She walked alone toward her car. No one saw her drive away. No one, they said, followed her. If someone had grabbed her between the river and the cornfield, they'd done it on a stretch of road so familiar nobody ever paid attention to who drove it. The sheriff believed there had to be a witness, someone who saw a car parked where it shouldn't be, someone who noticed headlights out in the field, someone who heard a scream across 200 acres of corn. But every time he asked, the answer was the same. "I didn't see anything, Sheriff." And every time he turned his back, conversations stopped. Eyes moved away. The town pulled tighter around itself like a coat against the wind. The first suspect was the obvious one, Josh Halpern, Katie's on-and-off boyfriend. Josh was 18, restless, and just cocky enough to make adults suspicious. He'd argued with Katie at the grocery store 2 days before she vanished. Over what? No one could say for sure. Teen drama blurred quickly in memory. Police brought him in. He admitted they'd argued, said she accused him of seeing someone else. He swore he'd left the bonfire an hour before Katie, taking the back road home. His parents confirmed he was in his room by 12:15 a.m. His car was clean. No blood, no fibers, nothing that screamed crime scene. The second suspect was a stranger, a traveling seed salesman named Greg Morris, who had visited local farms the week Katie disappeared. He was staying at the motel off the interstate, the kind of place where you check in under the buzz of neon and try not to think about who slept in the bed before you. Morris had receipts placing him in town that weekend. He'd eaten at the diner, chatted with waitresses, even left an oversized tip. When the sheriff asked if he'd seen a girl matching Katie's description, Morris shook his head. "I'm in bed by 10 on the road," he said. "Driving all day'll do that to you." His car was checked, his trunk inspected. Nothing. The third suspect never sat in a formal interview. That was Earl Harper himself. Small-town logic is ruthless. He found the body. It was his field. His family and the Millers had history, good and bad. But Earl's timeline was airtight. His combine's GPS logs showed exactly when and where he'd been in the field that day and in June. He'd been harvesting a different section of land when Katie disappeared. Still, whispers floated. Maybe he knew more than he said. Maybe he saw something back then and kept quiet. Delaney followed every lead until they turned slack in his hands. Without cameras, without cell tower pings, without modern forensics, the case sagged under the weight of maybes. By winter, officially, the sheriff's office called it what everyone already felt: a cold case. Unofficially, it was something worse. It was a wound the town refused to look at. When a murder goes unsolved in a big city, life moves on around it. New crimes, new headlines. The story gets pushed to the bottom of the feed. In Miller's Crossing, nothing else happened. The corn still grew. The river still moved. Kids still went to Friday night games. But under the surface, everything changed. Parents clamped down. Curfews got earlier. Sleepovers got canceled. Girls were told never to walk alone after dark. The bonfire spot by the river grew over with weeds. No one bragged about sneaking out there anymore. At church, the pastor preached about trusting God's timing. In the pews, people thought about locking their doors. The diners and the bar kept serving coffee and beer, but conversations shifted when a stranger walked in. Outsiders might ask questions. Outsiders might poke at something everyone had decided, quietly, not to touch. Katie's parents became ghosts in their own lives. Her mother stopped attending potlucks. Her father stopped coming to the grain elevator meetings. A few months after the discovery, the Millers put their house up for sale and moved 3 towns over to live with relatives. They left behind an empty farmhouse and a cemetery plot with a stone that read, Catherine Joy Miller, 1978 to 1994. Always our girl. The town attended the funeral. Then it behaved as if talking about Katie made her death more real, more permanent. People said, that girl from a few years back, instead of her name. Children grew up knowing there had been a tragedy, but details blurred into cautionary tales. Don't hitchhike. Don't go to the river alone. Don't get into cars with people you don't trust. The cornfield at the edge of town became a landmark everyone recognized, and no one pointed at. And for nearly 3 decades, the case sat in a dusty box at the back of the evidence room. In 2022, Miller's Crossing got a new sheriff. Rachel Kim wasn't from around there. She transferred in from a county closer to Des Moines, drawn by the promise of quieter days and a lower crime rate after burning out on big city cases. Her first week on the job, she did what good detectives do. She walked through the evidence room. Boxes were labeled in thick black marker. Bar fight, 2011. Truck theft, 2007. Vandalism, high school. And then, near the back, a box with faded lettering. Miller, Cornfield, 1994. Rachel pulled it down, blew dust from the lid, and opened it. Inside were Polaroids of the Cornfield crime scene, typed witness statements from the bonfire kids, grainy cassette recordings of interviews, a plastic bag containing fragments of Katie's sweatshirt and that frayed bracelet. Attached to the inside flap was a note in Sheriff Delaney's handwriting. No suspects charged. Insufficient evidence. The family moved out of the jurisdiction. Case inactive unless new info emerges. Rachel stared at the note. In the city she'd worked, cold cases like this sometimes got fresh life thanks to DNA, genealogy databases, and better tech. She checked the log. No one had revisited the Miller case since 1998, when the state lab had done a limited retest on some trace hairs and come up empty. She took the file home that weekend, not because anyone asked, not because the budget had room for it, but there's something about a teenage girl buried in a field that doesn't let you sleep soundly once you've seen the photos. The next Monday, she made a decision that would drag Miller's Crossing back into its unfinished past. She called the state crime lab. I've got a 1994 cold case, she said, and I want to know what we can do with it now that we couldn't back then. Advances in forensic science can do something small towns never expect. They talk when people won't. The state lab agreed to re-examine the physical evidence, this time using modern touch DNA methods and updated databases. Technicians swabbed the inside of Katie's sweatshirt cuffs, the friendship bracelet. Soil scraped from under the fingernails was saved at autopsy. Back in '94, those samples had been too degraded or too minimal to be useful. In 2022, mini STR kits could pull out readable profiles from fragments that used to be useless. Weeks stretched into months. Life went on in Miller's Crossing. People worried more about grocery prices and less about old unsolved murders. Then the call came. Sheriff Kim, we've got something. On the bracelet, woven threads Katie's friends had tied around her wrist at the start of summer. They found Katie's DNA, as expected, and a partial male profile that didn't match any known boyfriend, family member, or previously sampled person in the case. It wasn't enough for a full Cody's hit, but it was enough for genetic genealogy. Working with a contracted genealogist, the lab built out a family tree from distant cousin matches, branch by branch, ruling out lines until they landed on a short list of living males who could statistically fit that partial profile. One name on that short list made Rachel stop. He still lived in Miller's Crossing. He still owned land that touched the Harper field. And he'd never once been mentioned in the original investigation. His name was Pastor Mark Harlan. Pastor Harlan had been Miller's Crossing's spiritual backbone for decades. He'd arrived fresh out of seminary in 1990, a young man with a soft voice and a firm handshake, the kind of presence that made people feel both seen and gently corrected. By 1994, he'd married a local girl, started a family, and was leading youth group meetings in the church basement. Katie had been a regular. Sermon notes from those years mentioned her by first name. Katie shared about her mission trip, prayed for Katie's exams. In the original file, Pastor Harlan appeared exactly twice. Once in a list of people interviewed at the prayer vigil after Katie's disappearance. Once as the officiant at her funeral. No one had thought to ask if he'd seen her the night she vanished. After all, he was the one comforting everyone else. Rachel requested a surreptitious DNA sample, a coffee cup left behind after a community meeting, a napkin from the diner. When the lab compared it to the unknown male profile from the bracelet, the answer came back clear. Pastor Mark Harlan could not be excluded as the contributor. Statistically, it was a strong association. Legally, it was a starting point, not a conviction. Rachel requested the old youth group attendance sheets. The church secretary, now retired, hair white but memory sharp, dug them out of a file cabinet. On June 18, 1994, the night Katie vanished, Harlan had scheduled a youth bonfire devo at the river. Same place, same time. Witness statements from the original file said a bunch of kids were there, but none had mentioned the pastor specifically. When Rachel re-interviewed those now-grown kids, a different picture emerged. Yeah, he was there at first, one man said. Opened with a prayer, talked about temptation or whatever. Then he left before midnight. Said he had to lock up the church. Are you sure he left? Rachel asked. He shrugged. I mean, that's what we all said back then. Another former teen, now a tired-eyed single mom, gave a different answer. He left, she said. I walked back toward the parking area and saw his car still there with the lights off. Two silhouettes inside. I didn't want to know. Why didn't you tell anyone? Rachel asked. The woman stared at the wall for a long time. In this town, she said, no one wanted to be the person who said the pastor was parked in the dark with a girl who disappeared. Silence, it seemed, had been a community project. Confronting a beloved pastor with a decades-old murder suspicion in a tight-knit town requires more than a warrant. It requires a plan. Rachel scheduled what looked like a routine pastoral check-in, a get-to-know-the-new sheriff meeting. They sat in his office, shelves lined with theology books and framed photos of mission trips. He was older now, hair thinning, smile still practiced. After small talk, Rachel slid a photo across the desk. Katie, grinning in a softball uniform. You knew her well, Rachel said. He nodded. A sweet girl. A tragedy I still pray about. Your DNA was found on her bracelet, Rachel said quietly. We matched it from a cup you left at the diner. The room cooled. That's impossible, Harlan said, voice tightening. I never. Skin cells, Rachel said. Maybe from adjusting it during prayer. Maybe from holding her hand. I'm not saying it proves you killed her. I'm saying it proves contact you never disclosed to investigators. He swallowed. I counseled all my youth, he said. We held hands in prayer circles. hugged after hard talks. If my DNA is there, it's because I care. Rachel held his gaze. Did you care about her the night of June 18th, 1994? He looked away. This is absurd, he said. People in this town know who I am. They know my character. That's exactly what I'm worried about, Rachel said. That people knew you, and that knowledge stopped them from telling the truth. She let the silence stretch. When you left the bonfire that night, she asked, did Katie leave with you? His jaw clenched. Sheriff, he said, I think we're done here. For the first time, Rachel saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not shocked, not righteous indignation, fear. The break came from an unexpected place. A week after Rachel's conversation with Pastor Harlan, she got a call from an attorney in Des Moines representing a woman who wanted to unburden herself. The woman was from Miller's Crossing originally. She'd moved away years ago, cut ties, and never looked back. Her name was Angela Price. In 1994, Angela had been 15, too young to drive, too old to believe every adult had her best interests at heart. She met Rachel in a small conference room, hands folded, eyes wet. I should have said something back then, Angela said, but it was the pastor, and my mom told me not to ruin things for the church. She described the night of June 18th. Youth group around the fire. Pastor Harlan led songs and a short talk about purity. Jokes and marshmallows afterward. At some point, Angela said, he pulled Katie aside. I saw them walking toward the parking area. Later, I went up there to get my jacket from my dad's truck. She paused. His car was there, she said. The driver's seat was empty. The passenger door was cracked. I heard arguing. A man and a girl. Could you hear what they said? Rachel asked. Just bits, Angela said. You promise? This has to stop. No one will believe you. Stuff like that. Did you see them? Rachel pressed. Angela nodded slowly. I saw him, she said, in the driver's seat. Saw his hand on her wrist. The same bracelet we all had. Why didn't you tell anyone? Rachel asked. Because when I got back to the fire, my mom was packing up chairs with him, Angela said, voice shaking. He smiled at me like nothing had happened, and she said, isn't Pastor Mark wonderful? We're so lucky to have him. Her mother had later told her, you must have misunderstood. Don't spread stories. That's how good men get hurt. A week after Katie disappeared, Angela tried again, telling her mother she thought Katie had left with the pastor. Her mother's response was sharp. You will not repeat that. Ever. Do you understand? Fear and loyalty did the rest. Angela moved away after graduation. She hadn't set foot in Miller's Crossing in over 20 years. Why now? Rachel asked. Angela wiped her eyes. Because I saw a documentary about DNA solving old church cases, she said. And I thought, if they ever come for him, I want them to have the whole story. Armed with Angela's testimony, the DNA findings, and the old case file, Rachel presented everything to the county prosecutor. They debated the time gap, the lack of physical evidence tying Harlan directly to the Cornfield, the town's likely reaction. Finally, the prosecutor agreed. They would charge Pastor Mark Harlan with second-degree murder and abuse of a corpse, arguing that he'd assaulted Katie, caused her death, intentionally or through violence, and hidden her body in a field he knew well from countless pastoral visits and farm calls. The arrest stunned Miller's Crossing. Some church members shouted that it was persecution. Others said they'd had a bad feeling for years, but never voiced it. Older congregants whispered about times Harlan had counseled girls alone in his office. Parents remembered how he always offered rides home after youth events. At the bail hearing, Katie's father returned to town for the first time in decades. He sat behind Rachel, hands clasped. When the judge denied bail, citing flight risk and community outrage, Harlan finally spoke. I'm innocent, he said, voice breaking. I loved this town. I loved those kids. Rachel didn't look away. Loving kids doesn't put your DNA on their bracelet the night they died, she said later, outside the courtroom. Facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison, Harlan's righteous posture began to crumble. In a closed-door meeting with his attorney and the prosecutor, he offered a partial confession. He admitted being alone with Katie in his car that night, crossing a line during what he called counseling, grabbing her when she threatened to tell. Her head hit the door frame harder than he meant it to. He claimed she went limp, that he panicked, that he drove with her body in the trunk for a while, before burying her in a field he knew would be harvested months later. He insisted he never intended to kill her. The prosecutor agreed to a plea: manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, lifetime registration as a violent offender. For Katie's parents, it wasn't enough, but it was the first time anyone had said out loud what happened in that field. Years later, people still drive past the Harper field without pointing. There's no roadside memorial, no plaque, just acres of corn that rise each summer and vanish each fall, like time erasing and rewriting the same story over and over. Some in Miller's Crossing will tell you justice was finally served. Others will say the town paid a different price. Their trust in institutions, their belief that good men are incapable of harm, their comfort in keeping hard questions unasked. Sheriff Rachel Kim still keeps the Miller case box in her office, but it looks different now. Inside, alongside the Polaroids and reports, there's a handwritten note from Katie's mother. Thank you for believing she was worth revisiting. On certain evenings, Rachel drives out to the edge of the field and sits with the engine off, listening to the wind rustle through the rows. She thinks about how easily a community's desire to stay peaceful can slide into protecting the wrong person. How a girl can disappear not just from the riverbank, but from conversation, from memory, from justice, until someone decides silence is no longer holy, just convenient. The cornfield doesn't talk, but the soil remembers. It remembers the weight it was asked to hide. It remembers the night a car's headlights cut through the rows and then went dark. It remembers a bracelet pressed into the earth, threads fraying under the slow grind of seasons. For the rest of us, this cold case is a reminder. When a whole town refuses to talk about the same thing, it isn't because nothing happened. It's because something did. And the longer the silence lasts, the more courage it takes for the first person to break it. You've been listening to Enter the Crime.